Okay, now we're going to talk about passive reconnaissance, and this is involving OSINT, Shodan, the Harvester, Maltego. There's a lot of other tools out there. Those are just some of the tools we'll talk about. And there is a homework assignment which has you do passive reconnaissance using Shodan, Dig, and the Harvester on a specific domain to actually kind of learn a little bit more about what is out there. So what is passive reconnaissance? This is where you collect information about a target using just publicly available sources. So you aren't pinging the systems, you aren't actually testing whether or not a port is open, you're just using effectively search engines to learn more about that particular environment. So there is no direct contact. So you don't actually call anybody up. You use anything other than talking to the actual business for this. This involves OSINT, which is open source intelligence, which is extracting intelligence from publicly available sources. So if you have good OSINT skills, you may know more about the organization's infrastructure than their own internal IT team. That's rare, but it is possible that you learn things that their internal team may not know about. And this is part of the issue with working in an environment is you start to become comfortable with that environment and start to not notice when things go wrong or are poorly configured or are exposed to the external internet. So you're looking for IP ranges, domain names, email formats, employee names, roles, whatever technology stack they have, any third-party vendors, subdomains, exposed services, leaked credentials, organizational structure. A lot of this you can find from several different searches. So IP ranges, for instance, if you know the organization name, well, you can use BGP lookup for finding the specific autonomous system numbers, and that will list a number of IP ranges. If you have their domain names, you can look at the DNS records to grab the IP ranges or some of the IP addresses which are assigned to them, and then you can use tools like Whois to then figure out what ranges they may have assigned to their particular business. Email formats, you can find a lot of people will put stuff on LinkedIn or on their own web pages or something of that nature. Employee names, you can find out a lot of that from looking through their particular website. And so there may be roles there as well. Technology stack. Some of this is just publicly exposed. Some of it is exposed through searches and things of that nature. Same with third-party vendors, subdomains. That's another, you can find a lot of that out from a bunch of DNS searching. Any exposed services, Shodan will tell you quite a bit about that. Leaked credentials, you can find out about that from other sites, so on and so forth. So OSINT's source category, so DNS and Whois. So Whois will show you the domain registrant, registrar, when the domain was registered, when it expires, who the technical contact details are. In this day and age, for businesses, that usually has a lot of information. But for smaller businesses and individuals, it's becoming more and more common to have privacy, DNS privacy added onto a domain. So it's a lot harder to find some of that information there. DNS does have different domain records. So the A record would be the IPv4 address, quad A would be the IPv6, MX is your mail exchange record. So where does it actually get routed to? So you can kind of start to map out how email flows to that particular environment. Text records will show what third-party systems are allowed to or are registered with that particular business. NS is going to be your name server record. So you can use Dig or NSLookup to pull up that information. There are also other online websites which display a lot of this similar information. Certificate transparency log, so cert.sh, that's for subdomain enumeration. So if you have a domain, CNAMEs are not exposed automatically. If you know of a CNAME, you can perform dig on that to try to trace it, but it doesn't list all of the CNAMEs for a particular domain. Well, when you have a certificate, that's typically on a specific subdomain. And so a certificate transparency, like at CertSH, may have a lot of those subdomains which are registered there. Again, I mentioned the ASN lookup through bgp.he.net. So ASNs would allow you to see what network or what IP ranges are assigned to that particular environment. Search engines. There's what's known as Google dorking, and we'll talk a little bit more about Google dorking, but it's basically using Google and passing in specific flags to look for specific types of information. So if you just say go to google.com, you say site:target.com, file type :PDF, well, that will pull up a list of all of the PDFs which have been indexed from that particular target site. Same with in URL or in title. It will pull up any link which has that information. Bing and DuckDuckGo, there's also Yahoo, there's a bunch of other search engines. Google will sometimes filter their results, and so going to multiple other search engines is commonplace these days. You can also look at the cached view of or the historical views or versions of those pages. A common site for that these days is archive.org, which is the Web Archive project, and they make a plan of mapping out the entire internet and keeping versions of all of those web pages. Some of them are a little bit more accurate than others. Like some of them will have images and scripts and everything else. Some of them will not. You just end up having to look through different versions of that. And so cached pages may have config files or may have other information which could be relevant to a particular penetration testing. Social and professional. So LinkedIn, you can look for employees based off of the names or businesses, roles, text out from job postings, things of that nature. GitHub may have leaked API keys or internal host names, configuration files. Twitter, I refuse to call it X, so Twitter may have other information there. Glassdoor is job listings for all sorts of different businesses, and will list a lot of things like salary ranges, and could even list like more internal information depending upon what people post up there. And then there's also data breach sources. So have I been pwned? A lot of you are very familiar with that. That's where you can punch in an email address and see what breaches that address may have been associated with. They do take a lot more security these days, so you can't just put in anybody's email address. A lot of times, especially for the more secure or sensitive breaches, you have to actually validate that email address. But all the information that Have I Been Pwned is getting gets from posted leaks, or somebody sends a copy of that particular leak. So you can look through dark web monitoring for various leaks. Pastebin, there's also Dhashed or Snoospace, where you can start looking for all of those. So there's a lot of data breach sources out there that you may just end up needing to look through to try to identify more information. And sometimes you can find compromised credentials before the business actually knows about them. So Google dorking. This is, like I had mentioned, where you pass in additional flags to the search to identify various things. So for instance, if you wanted to find all the login pages for a particular domain, well, your search is site:/domain name, in URL login, or in URL admin, or in URL sign in, and that might find any login pages for a specific domain. If you wanted to find, say, all Excel documents or PDF documents which had the phrase confidential in it, well, then that's that site:/target file type XLSX or file type PDF, and then confidential in quotes. Open directory listings, you can do in title, index of, and you can add in parent directory, and this will let you start finding open directories, so that then you could potentially browse through files that may not normally be exposed. .git, so index of /.git, that's where it has all the git configuration. If you can find a somebody who accidentally uploaded a .git folder onto their website, then that will have the information. PHP info, well, that produces a lot of sensitive information, so these days it should be secured, but in some cases, well, it may not be. And so if a site has their PHP info publicly available, well, then you can get information on their particular environment and versions and potential attack vectors. Combining all of that, there's also exploit-db, and that will have inside of there, there's a Google hacking database, which has lots of pre-built dorks for different vulnerability types and just a lot of searching. So you can kind of combine all of that to identify the environment and identify potential vectors that you can attack a system. Shodan, this is another site that some of you are familiar with. It's shodan.io. If you sign in with your .edu email address, then it gives you a free upgrade to their membership plan, which allows you to use filters and their API and a lot more than just the free account will. But for this, if you know a environment's IP range, then you can do a search. It's just net : then the IP range. So in this example, 203.0.113.0/24. If you want to find exposed RDP servers in that particular range, then you just add in port : 3389. Find all systems for a particular organization. Well, you just do a search for an org. You can find default credentialed routers if it has a default password. Elastic database, which is for log management and log searching. So it's part of the ELK cluster. That is over a specific port and you're looking for JSON. And if a IP address or a range has that exposed, well, then Shodan will show that out. So Shodan will show for each IP address which is identified, any open ports, the service banners for those ports, SSL certificate information, response headers, sometimes screenshots, geographic location, quite a bit of information. It's all publicly available. So this is all passive to the environment. So Shodan is a huge tool to really start to map out an entrance or an attack vector for an environment. There is a API, like I said, if you sign in with your .edu address, then you get a free upgrade to the membership. If not, then right now I think it's like $50 a year, or a $50 one-time fee, $49 I think. But that will allow you to use their API to kind of script it to pull that information. And so organizations that use Shodan, they'll use it to look at their services, look at their assets, and try to protect their environment before a malicious actor discovers those exposed services. Penetration testers, they use it to find those services that shouldn't be internet facing, say RDP servers, to help them get a entrance into that particular environment. Next tool is the Harvester. And the Harvester is basically a command line search engine for all this open source, all these open source tools and a lot of other tools which do require an API key. So it aggregates all this OSINT data from multiple engines and APIs and will export it as a XML file or as a JSON or let you see a lot of information. It's installed by default on Kali Linux, although you can install it on any system. There's a Git repository which has it there, and it's as easy as saying the Harvester, and then -d is the domain that you're going to be targeting, and then -b is the data source for it. So that first line there, it's looking at target.com, and it's specifically using DuckDuckGo and LinkedIn and grabbing information from that, and it's only grabbing the first 500 entries from there. And this is a tool, and there's the homework assignment which will have you use it. This is a tool which is quite powerful. But I will say that sometimes the results are not entirely accurate. So CRT.sh, for instance, that site is inconsistently up and inconsistently accessible. And so when you run the harvester using cert.sh, you may not get any result. And so you may have to run it several times until you get some results from that particular domain. Also, multiple runs may give you different results depending upon how that information is returned by the particular search engine. There is also a file that you can edit to add in the API keys. So Shodan, you can grab that API key and then edit the harvester API keys YAML file, add in the Shodan API key, and then it will automatically use Shodan and grab that information. So this list of data sources at the bottom isn't all of them. They keep adding more and removing some. So in the past, you used to be able to use Google, but Google has blocked off access to a lot of it. Bing used to be in there, but you can't use that anymore. But it still does have a decent number of targets that you can use for or data sources that you can use for figuring out where a system is and what subdomains and IP addresses and everything else they have. Maltego, this is a graph-based OSINT, so this would let you visualize the relationship between domains, IPs, people, organizations, social profiles, and things of that nature. So you'll have an entity graph where every piece of collected intelligence is represented as a node, and it will draw relationships between all of those. You can run transforms to run queries across the expanded entities, and there's a free community edition. You can also pay for it. There's a professional edition which removes any limits that are there, but it would be more of an enterprise type usage. And then there's also the certificate transparency and DNS recon. So looking at the certificates on a site and actually identifying the domains from there. So for instance, if you look at yahoo.com, or not Yahoo, youtube.com, look at their certificate, and then you look at the subject alternative names, you'll start to see all of the other domains that Google uses that certificate on. There's also a zone transfer attempt. So there's a AXFR from Dig to try to transfer DNS zones, usually will fail. But you can use that. There's you can enumerate the common subdomains. So that's just a one-line bash script, and it will try to do a dig on www.target.com, mail.target.com, vpn.target.com, dev.target.com, api.target.com, and admin.target.com, and print out the results for all of those. So if you have a list of common subdomains, then you can use that. I will say that cert.sh and a number of other tools may show you a lot of other subdomains a lot quicker, just because certificates will end up being used on a lot of those subdomains automatically these days. So key takeaway: passive recon, no trace and target log. You don't go to the website. You don't actually ping anything. You don't try connecting to anything. It's all just using search engines and looking at it from open source tools. Or it may not be open source tools. They could be closed source tools, but it's public sources. And then there's Google dorking, which is different search parameters for finding information out. Shodan's a great tool for identifying various ports and various methods of accessing it. The Harvester is a command line interface for a lot of it, and will it has 15 plus. It has quite a few sources that you can actually run through. Maltego will be a graph-based visualization. cert.sh and Dig and other tools, those are also useful for identifying domains and subdomains.